Welcome to Frank Wealth Insights, a financial and investment podcast from Return on Life Wealth Partners. They look at your money. We look at your life at returnonlifewealth.com.
Let's look at your life. I'm Frank Fantozzi, and I'm president and founder of Return on Life Wealth Management. It's hard to believe, but we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, and I couldn't be prouder of our firm and the team that I get to work with every day. I'm really excited today because I'm joined by one of our team members, Chelsea Hussey, to go over multi-generational wealth. Navigating the complexities and opportunities of multi-generational wealth is crucial for families aiming to preserve and grow their assets across several generations. So let's dive in to any questions that will come up during today and see how we can provide some content that could be beneficial to those that are listening.
All right. Good morning, Frank. How are you?
Doing great. Survived the not the lunar eclipse. We had the solar eclipse.
Yeah.
So I was out there like everybody else with my funky glasses and trying to take a peek at it. It was pretty cool. I have to admit, I'm glad I was around because I won't be around for the next one. How about you?
Oh, it was great. My daughter thought it was beyond fascinating, and the 3-year-old napped right through it, so I didn't have to worry about keeping his glasses on.
Yeah, well, I was looking at it. It was just so weird to see how the temperature started cooling and the birds and all that started getting quiet for that 10-15 minute period, and then everything kind of woke up again. So it's like having a sunrise and a sunset all in a matter of 15 minutes. So
very cool.
Well, where would you like to start?
Well, I think first, if we could define what exactly is multi-generational wealth and what's the primary difference between that versus the wealth you would accumulate in a single generation.
So multi-generational wealth in the context of what we're going to talk about today is having enough wealth that wealth can be perpetuated over multiple generations, where just wealth accumulation that we traditionally see when we talk about, retirement planning and making sure that we have enough to retire and then we have live a good life with dignity and having some assets maybe to leave towards our children. Here, there's going to be such amount of wealth left over that these type of clients don't worry about retirement planning. They're not worried about when I should retire and how much can I spend. It's really about having significant enough assets that they know future generations will have monies to work with, unless the family with the wealth decides to give it all to charity. So to put some context, around this, typically how the industry defines high net worth individuals are individuals that have 1 to 5 million in liquid net worth. The next rung up is what they call very high net worth individuals, really original. But those are individuals that tend to have $5 to $30 million in net worth. And then there's what they call the ultra high net worth individuals, which have 30 million or more of liquid net worth. So really, we're probably talking about the last two rungs, the very high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals, where some of the issues that they're going to face and need to plan for usually doesn't appear in lower net worth clients. Now, I think some of the things that we're going to talk about, like financial literacy, making sure, charitable giving, legacy planning, I think that applies to everyone. But there are certain things that are unique. When we talk about planning here, so I always think about Hollywood, and I'm a big movie buff. And in one of the Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man hears from his stepdad that with great power comes great responsibility. The same thing happens here when you have a lot of wealth. You do have a lot of responsibility because the complexity of managing wealth, the things that you have to think about, and some of the things that you don't plan for, because you're not really trained or educated, you have to deal with. And so it's kind of like what we talked about earlier before we started. People that aren't famous and then become famous, like in the movies, all of a sudden they're dealing with things that the average person doesn't deal with. And we say, well, why is that a problem? And we can't put ourselves in those shoes. And so today we're going to hopefully talk about some of the items that, people that are considered very high net worth individuals or families and ultra high net worth individuals and families, some of the items that they're going to have to consider and maybe give them some thought as to, how they could manage or approach, their multi-generational wealth.
Excellent. Now, are there any examples that you can share about the impact of really great multi-generational wealth planning and what the impact of that on communities and even on families.
Well, there's a lot of examples. I mean, you probably can go in every city in the U.S. and you will see how the city, their hospital systems and charities have what we call benefactors. These are individuals who have donated significant money because they believe in their cause. So you have a wing at a hospital named after an individual. I mean, here we have the University Hospital Systems and the Hussey Center. All that money was donated by the Hussey family. So there's plenty of examples here, but the main thrust of this, and probably one of the most famous families, is the Rockefeller family. You know, they were known for their oil fortune, and they had tremendous multi-generational wealth. And actually, Rockefeller got to start here in Cleveland with Standard Oil. But he established the University of Chicago. He's funded medical research, and his benefits, the seed money provided by the Rockefeller family, lives on. And that's one of the things that multi-generational wealth can do is there's plenty of money for their family and to live the kind of lifestyles they live. So they want to have an impact on the society around them. So looking at the individual community, if they have a cause, whether it's cancer research, whether it's supporting a hospital, any endeavor that you can feel like these great wealthy families, a lot of them can be tied to many of the nonprofits that you see across the country. And without them, you think about how these charities are part of our infrastructure, actually a social safety net. And without some of these families, what would we have? So we owe a debt of gratitude to these families that do support major endeavors in our cities and in our communities.
Excellent. Well, I know that one of the values that you commonly espouse with our team is the importance of legacy and being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. So what are some common strategies for people to build and preserve this multi-generational wealth, people who have that desire to leave a legacy and make an impact?
Well, I think in its basic form, I think this is one of those items that applies to everybody. You have to really start, with some building blocks, which is not putting all your eggs in one basket. You're figuring out how to diversify your risk because any one event could take away, the family fortune. You have to start looking at protecting your assets. So the use of family trusts are methods of not only protecting assets from lawsuit, from divorce, but also the trusts usually outline, have verbiage and how that money can be used. So it protects future generations from missteps. Another section we'll probably talk to later, and I know you're very familiar with this, is when we talk about estate planning. The IRS tax code, unless it changes or at the end of 2025 when the Trump era taxes sunset, the current gift and estate tax exemption is approximately $27 million. So if you structure things right, anyone who's not, is worth up to $27 million could probably avoid paying estate taxes. But there are families that are out there that are worth significantly more. And estate taxes start out at 40 cents on the dollar. So you can see the potential harm to that. So a lot of these families enlist financial advisors, CPA firms, lawyers that are constantly trying to look at the tax law as a way of, protecting and keeping more of what you have. And then the other is, especially a lot of families, if you look at your most richest families, they can most of the time tie their fortune to a business, right? And so what we'll talk about later in regards to equity amongst the family is, how is the business going to work? What happens if there's family in the business, not in the business? How do you do succession planning with that business? Because at some point, the business is going to have to change hands. So these are things that we have to look at. And a great example is the Walton family, because their net worth isn't just tied to Walmart. As big as Walmart is, they have holdings in banking and technology and real estate to, again, diversify their wealth and also to engage family members in different areas, because not all family members may want to be in the family business. So those are some of the high-level items that we can talk about in regards to, building and preserving wealth. So now I'm going to flip something back on you, Chelsea, because I know you're very good at this and working with your clients. But what is the role of education play in helping families protect their wealth in future generations?
It's paramount. It's very important. It begins with the generation or maybe the couple or the individual who has this goal for creating the multi-generational wealth. Is it sitting down with that objective third party, a trusted advisor, to really define and articulate exactly what those goals are? What does their legacy mean to them? What are some causes that are near and dear to their heart? What sort of financial impact do they want to be able to make in their community? And then through having a real defined plan, it's then extremely important to begin looping in other members of that generation so that they understand what the objective is. We were talking about with these businesses, what is it? Typically the first generation builds it, the second generation grows it, and the third
loses it.
And it's typically because with that third generation is they might not really understand exactly what went into building it, or even understand what are these impacts. They may just know from an outsider's perspective, well, my grandparents have accumulated so much wealth, but why don't they share the love? Where's my due? And unfortunately, money can really be a big divider with families. So the clearer you are with your intentions, and the better example you can be at being a steward of wealth, the better you can then pass that on to the next generation to ensure that they can continue that legacy.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chelsea. I see, there's a time and place to introduce education and not to overwhelm a child. But I see a lot of families, they're afraid to let their kids know of their financial success. And so the kids don't know, and they're never raised and taught about the responsibility that comes with having money. So one of the examples I use a lot is athletes. When you think about most people in their earning potential years, you tend to make most of your money in your late 40s, 50s, and early 60s. As you grow within your profession and you become more of an expert, climb the corporate ladder, your compensation goes up. But you're much older though, right? You're in your 50s. You weathered storms. You have maturity behind you. You usually have a family and responsibility. With athletes, it's flipped upside down. You have these young men and women who get out of high school, go to college, and let's even talk about the one and done. I go to college for 1 year, and I enter the NBA draft, and I'm awarded all this money, but I'm 18, 19 years old, and now I have millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not even thinking about retirement. I have this immunity to death because I'm going to live forever. And why do so many athletes squander so much of their money? Usually it's because one, maybe the family isn't financially literate in regards to understanding how to manage wealth. The child, and this is a U.S. problem. I mean, schools are terrible. They're great at teaching about math, English, history. They teach very little to nothing about basic financial management. Yet we're sending these kids out, go to college and even graduate college to earn a job, and they don't even know how to balance a checkbook. So now you see why a lot of these athletes, have failed. And the same thing with lotto winners. So the studies are amazing at all these lottery winners who win all this money and then 3 to 7 years later are broke. They've squandered it all. So financial education is important because with knowledge comes understanding. With understanding gives you the ability to make informed decisions versus just guessing.
That's right. So we both alluded to this earlier, but what are some of the more common challenges or pitfalls that families will face when managing this multi-generational wealth?
Well, there's several. I mean, the first one starts the way we just left off. I mean, mismanagement of assets. A lot of times, especially with the very high net worth and ultra high net worth, they delegate that responsibility and they hire money managers, financial advisors like us, but they don't stay involved in the management process. And so sometimes, you deal, like in any industry, you deal with people that are not as ethical as they should be, and their assets can get mismanaged. The assets can get squandered. Families that are not, again, well educated don't understand that even if you're ultra high net worth and have millions and millions of dollars, it's still a finite resource. And at some point, that money can run out. A common one, it's like the old adage. When people pass away and the will is read, and people start arguing that why did Bobby get this and Sally get this? So when you have wealth distribution, there's conflicts over it, and people get upset. So we had a famous case goes back to the 70s and early 80s. The Horowitz family, very wealthy family in Cleveland. They had three major businesses. They had real estate, they had media businesses, like newspapers, and then they had their construction business. And you saw it all over Northeastern Ohio. The father tried to do the right thing, we think. Set up these trusts to create management, to create structure. My guess is that I'm only speculating here. I don't think he really involved the children in the planning process. But the long and short of it is they set up all these trusts, and trusts are hard to break. I mean, very rarely will the courts not honor a trust. And in this case, there was actually fist fighting going on in the courtrooms. People were not getting along. The government got so fed up. The courts got so fed up. They forced the family to sell everything. They had to sell their construction company, the media interests, and the real estate, and they just distributed all the money to everybody and said, here's your money, go do what you want. So one of the things we'll talk about later is really eliminating the family squabbles and trying to be, there's a difference between being fair and equitable, and we'll talk about it later. But everyone has their own perception of what is fair and equal. And then the other risk is diluting wealth across too many descendants without adequate growth strategies. If you try to include everybody and you try to feed too many mouths and you don't really figure out how to grow your assets correctly, like I said, it's a finite finite resource. The one example is the Vanderbilt family, one of the wealthiest families at the United States at the turn of the 19th century. They made their money primarily on railroad and shipping empires. But because of their management of their funds, they had significant wealth dilution over mismanagement, living well beyond their means. Like I shared, even the ultra high net worth have a limit. And basically, the family is not once what it used to be. And you don't even hear about the Vanderbilt family anymore, except for any of the charities that they supported. So those are some of the common pitfalls in regards to that.
So in working to overcome some of these pitfalls, what are some things that these families can do to try to ensure a fair and equitable wealth transfer? For example, a family might have a business owner who has two sons, one son highly involved in the business. He's been growing it. The other son completely not involved at all. When that owner dies, how can he make sure that those two sons each feel made whole, in a sense?
Yeah, we could do a whole segment on just fair and equitable wealth transfer. But those are really insightful questions, Chelsea. So I'll start at a high level, and again, how everyone decides what's fair and equal is kind of to the beholder. But I think the key thing, when you think about wealth, right, and, let's just say, and the family's even just worth 30, 40 million. We're not talking the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers that are, $1 billion or $500 million net worth. We're just talking, and I don't mean to trivialize it, but 30 to 40 million. Most of that wealth again goes back to people that have businesses, right? So you mentioned there's people that are in and out of the business. Not every family member has a right to be an owner. Not every family member should be employed by the business. They might not have the skill sets. So the first thing that's really, really important, and it does take a lot of responsibility to do this, is create clear expectations of communication with the family, making sure that the children, of the parents. So let's just say we're talking about the first generation has all the money. They built a successful business. And now you have three children. Maybe one's in the business and two's not. The parents have to have clear communications about expectations and why they feel that they're making the decisions that they're making. Second, we talk about the use of trusts. Trusts have a form of asset protection, tax protection possibly. But again, you set rules in the trust so that no one individual can squander the money. They use what they call spendthrift provisions, which is a term used so that there's a limit on how much the beneficiary, in this case the children, can take out of the trust. You have to look at the needs of each of your beneficiaries. If you have a special needs child, I had a client. They had 4 children. 3 of the children are in high-paying positions. So one child works in social work. Now she's very successful in social work. She doesn't make a lot of money. So the parents looked at it as, listen, we helped all the children be the best they can be in their respective fields, but they know their one child is not financially going to have the same resources. So in their minds, what's equitable is to provide a little bit more money to that child that is successful, is at the top of their game in social work, but is never going to achieve the same. Two of their other children, one's a doctor, one's an attorney. and they're highly successful in their respective fields, but they make significantly more money. So that's how that family looked at it. You have to regularly review and update your wealth transfer plans because your situation is not static, it's dynamic. So as your family situation changes, as the dynamics of the family change, you need to make sure that your planning is current. One of the examples, and this is where you get family involvement, is you create a family constitution. Think of the Constitution that we have for the United States. It has, here's the rules, here's how we're going to operate, and you get everyone to buy in. So that anytime, let's face it, when things are going good, no one's arguing. What you need is when things aren't going well, or there's a problem or a conflict, you need something that was created that everyone agreed to that says, okay, this is how we're going to handle things. And a family constitution, sets the rules about how we communicate information, how we have family meetings, how we do social endeavors by donating to charities, how we're going to distribute wealth, how do we help, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. So getting everyone involved in the use of a family constitution can be very, very helpful because when there are challenges going on, you go back to the Constitution. When everyone was happy and agreeing, we all agreed that this is how things are going to work. You look at Warren Buffett, and he's one of the world's wealthiest families. He's made it very, very clear that most of his wealth is going to go to charities. And one of those big charities is the Gates Foundation. He's definitely going to leave his children and grandchildren in a better position, but they're not going to inherit his vast fortune. The majority of his fortune is going to go to public use through charity because he feels that's equitable. He's benefited greatly from it. His family's going to continue to benefit, but they don't need to have so much money that they don't have a cause to get up every day and go do something positive. So his way of dealing with it is to give it away. You
weren't kidding about with great power comes great responsibility. It can sound like a lot of to-dos, a family constitution, family meetings, over-communicating if you need to. But it's one of those good problems to have, but it's certainly a lot of responsibility to make sure that, again, you can be a good steward of that wealth and pass it along to create that legacy. Can you expound a little bit more on really utilizing multi-generational wealth in supporting philanthropic endeavors?
Well, we touched on that earlier, Chelsea, and I'm going to share advice that someone gave to me. His name's Mike Benz. He ran United Way here for a long time. And, I was getting involved. And at the time, I didn't have as much money to donate, but I had time to donate. And he always told me, he says, make sure you're very successful in your business, because when you become successful in business, you'll be able to help more, not only with time, but with money. So he says, while I appreciate you volunteering here, don't lose sight of the fact that you had a business to run. And I never lost sight of that. So, it's very important. I know our firm, you're very involved in Girl Scouts, and a lot of our advisors are involved in other charities. So there's ways to give back through time, time and money. But we found that a lot of families, they have a charity or charities of choice. And some of it has happened because something's happened to a family member, whether it's, God forbid, a suicide or, diabetes runs in the family. So they want to allocate resources to that. So what you'll find is these families will set up, donor advised funds, or even something more advanced like, family foundation, where the family foundation ends up becoming like a little enterprise. And there's a board, there's things that you have to do to run a family foundation, towards certain rules, but there's a requirement to distribute money every year. And what's nice about the family foundation, and the same thing can be done with a donor advised fund, is you can involve the whole family. So you can start teaching children at a young age to know what it's like to have civic duty in regards to in giving back. And so one of the methods we've seen with some of our clients is whether it's a donor advised fund or, you don't even need that. Even if you're a family that likes to donate money, they involve the children. And they start saying, hey, what cause do you believe in? What's important to you? And they take some of the family money that's allocated towards philanthropy, and they let the child pick a charity. Even if it's $100, now the child is starting to learn the gratitude of and the happiness of giving. So philanthropy becomes a really big deal. One of the most famous families is the Gates Foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates, their charity touches everything worldwide. from health issues, education, poverty, hunger. They donate millions upon millions of dollars every year. But that wouldn't have been possible if, he wasn't successful with Microsoft, right? And so this is where, sometimes there's this battle on big business and all that. But at the end of the day, some of these big businesses, without them, who would be funneling all this money to these charities to get them off the ground, to support them, and to reach people in need? So I think philanthropy starts at home. I don't think it has to do with net worth. My mom, my dad had, just a standard middle class family, but my mom always, she was a big believer in her church. And she made sure every week when she went to church, she donated to the church's causes, and that's what she did. So I think it starts at home. I think it's a foundational commitment, and I think if you involve your children, then it's something that can be perpetuated because it's something learned. And then once they start to learn it and value it, and it becomes part of their DNA, it's something that can be passed down through generations.
Now we talked about this at the top, the estate tax exemption being approximately, $27 million?
$27 million
this year.
That's a lot of money.
That is. But are there any particular tax implications that families should be aware of with that goal for multi-generational wealth?
Well, again, this is another topic that you can spend days on. So just to take a step back, give you some history. Part of the reason why the estate tax was developed was the government was worried that, once you reach a certain threshold of wealth, we always talk the first million is the hard one to make. Then the second million becomes easier because you got the first million working. Now you're talking about people that are, families that are worth 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money inertia. And what happens is if that money is never really taxed, it's hard to imagine, but it's like they're not going to ever run out of money, even if they spend like a drunken sailor. So you have all this money and this family growing with wealth, and the government was worried, well, these families could get so powerful, and let's face it, and we talked about charities earlier, right? Now these families have businesses, and they're looking to protect their business and their business interests. And so now they're trying to, talk to their congressman and lobby for rules that help their business. And so what they were worried about is having extreme wealth that was never taxed, never shrunken a little bit, and never tempered, that these families could potentially be harmful to how free market systems would work. So that's why the estate tax was really developed, is to kind of put a damper on extreme wealth from being accumulated and never stopping. So now, anytime there are rules, there's people trying to figure ways around them, just like on the income tax side. So people that have tremendous net worth literally employ full-time their financial advisors, their CPAs, their attorneys, and are looking at the complex tax code, which when I started in 1987, the thickness of the books we had, the IRS code, it's like tripled. That's how much law is there, and it's so complex. And so what they're trying to figure out, all these experts, are how do I set things up so I have to legally set things up to pay as little to Uncle Sam. So tax implications are real. Everyone's trying to feel, just like someone who doesn't have a lot. Why pay more tax if there's a legal way to pay less? So all they're doing is their God-given right to figure out legally how to lower their estate tax exposure so more money is kept within the family. It's very, very complex. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. But the one thing I always share with people is don't let the tax tail wag the financial dog. I think what that really means is we get so obsessed with taxes that we overlook the overall financial implication of making a good business decision. And so, we tell people, listen, take a step back, look at 30,000 feet, say, hey, is the transaction I'm looking to do, does it make sense? Does it make sense for the business? Does it make sense for the family? Does it support the values and goals I want? Because, the tax tail might send you in a different direction, and it might not be the direction you want. You might have unintended consequences. But a lot of it happens when you set up these very complex trusts. It might become so hard to navigate, and the rules become so complex that the way your family operates and the people you try to help, it just becomes, hard to navigate. So again, keep it simple. When I look at estate planning, it's taking what you have, giving it to whom you want, when you want, with any conditions. And regardless of net worth, that's a common rule that we share with people. So if you can articulate that to your advisors, then your advisor should be saying, listen, we can accomplish that. We can give it to whom you want, when you want, with those specific conditions. But I can help you lower your taxes without changing anything that you told me. That to me is a perfect marriage of, minimizing taxes and still accomplishing what I want with the assets that I have.
Great. Now I'm going to throw a little curveball question on here. You were talking about families working with, an advisor, a team of advisors. How does family offices, how do those tie in to multi-generational wealth?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And, there's things called family office and multifamily office. And really the difference is it's the same objective. It's just the people that have such high net worth, I would say 75 to 100 million in net worth, would start considering hiring one or several people or a team of people full time to be their advisors. Now, you think about it, so many businesses are not even worth 70 million or 100 million. So you have to think about it as, so say you had a business that you ran that's worth, even 70 million. And now you sell your business and now you have 70 million in cash. Well, you're still worth 70 million, but what are you going to have to do with it? Now you can make it simple and say, hey, I can just buy a bond portfolio, investment portfolio, let it go. But what you find out with families with that much money, they should be investing in other things outside of, not that they have to, but they tend to start investing in things that are what they call non-traditional assets. But the complexity, usually when people make more money, their lifestyles go up accordingly. You grew up in a little ranch. I grew up in a little 1,100 square foot ranch house. Now that, I've been more successful, I have a nicer home that's got more square footage. Well, now it requires me to pay more taxes and there's more work to be done on the house, right? So if you extrapolate that, what these family offices do is help navigate two things. One, financial oversight. How do you, we talked earlier about continuing to grow your wealth, build it, keep Uncle Sam at bay. Well, now you're having to employ and deal with multiple advisors. Even your insurance coverages are probably more complex because if you're worth 70, 100 million, I'm betting you probably have a second home, maybe a third home. You might have several cars. You might be taking care of your kids' properties. So now all things become complicated. And the family office are basically people who work for you, understand your family constitution, understand your mission and what you're trying to accomplish. And they deal with so much minutia that they're able to take that minutia and dial it back to what I call like an executive summary so that you can continue to make decisions. And then there's non-financial, what I call concierge services. Hey, I'm going to go to my home down in Florida. Can you make sure it's cleaned and ready and I'm ready to go there? I'm going to plan this trip to go here. Can you make sure things are ready for my vacation? And people of extreme wealth, people know who you are. Listen, we worry about our kids going to school and getting kidnapped. People know if you're worth $100 million and I take someone from your family, I got a chance of being paid a high ransom. It gets serious. So a number of things that you don't think about that happen. The family office is there to provide a structure to perpetuate your wealth, to protect your wealth, make the management of that wealth easier because for just a married couple to deal with all that, married couples have challenges now and they might be only worth a couple $1 million and they're worried about paying their bills and getting their kids to college. Well, you might not have any financial woes. You got to worry about money problems to solve. You still have to figure out how to manage all of that. And it becomes very, very complex. So a family office is a great tool. Families that aren't worth as much, the 15, $75 million range, they might not need someone hired full time, but they would hire a firm that could provide the financial services to kind of manage that complexity, to have a quarterback making it easy. Gotcha. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like a personal CFO.
Yeah, like a personal CFO, yep.
Gotcha.
So I want to ask you, I want to take you back to, because you're really good about education. I want to talk about, I'll give you a chance to talk about fostering financial literacy and why that's important in a family, regardless of net worth, but it becomes even more critical when you have more to lose.
Absolutely. Well, and we talked about this in our podcast last month on the importance of financial literacy, and it starts at a very early age with helping kids understand that money is a limited resource. And when you have a limited resource, it means you have to prioritize, you have to be creative about using that resource and maximizing it. And so I think it all goes back to understanding what, even if it's not formalized in the family constitution, but understanding what your family's values are, your overall money philosophy, and how you'd like to pass that on to your kids. And beginning at an early age, teaching them about that money. One of the best books I've read on money or wealth planning in general is The Millionaire Next Door. And the people who often are able to accumulate wealth, I think they call them PAWS, PAWS, prodigious accumulators of wealth. These are people whose children might not even have any awareness of how much money the parents have. But these kids grow up working and understanding the importance of preserving that money. And so it's really important to, as kids get older, not only teaching them independently about money through earning their own income, opening a savings account, eventually opening an investment account, but also making sure that they've got, again, just a good understanding of the family financial situation and what your long-term wishes are as a family.
Yeah, that's great advice, Chelsea. So how do you get parents to get over the stigma of keeping this wall of information between, their children and themselves? Like, I don't want my kids to know, because if they know, they're not going to want to do well in school, or they're not going to want to go out and work. So how do you get over that? Because clearly what I'm hearing is it's got to start with the parents. Usually the kids are going to come to you and say, "Oh, Mom, teach me more about money." So how do you help parents get over that stigma and break that wall down between them and the kids?
Yeah. Well, as an advisor, it really starts with us. When we're talking to these parents, we're asking them a lot of detailed questions and trying to go a few layers deep on even questions like, what's the best financial decision you've ever made? What's the worst? Tell me about that. Elaborate on that. Really helping them to understand what the importance is. I think as far as families sharing with children, it sort of depends, I think, a little bit on the age. It's got to be a little bit of a judgment call among the parents, I would say. If you have a child who's extremely anxious or is just prone to being a worrier, I wouldn't necessarily loop them in on something that you're concerned about financially. Maybe don't get them anxious about the stock market when you are. But something that a mantra that we seem to keep repeating is that knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And as kids get more involved in understanding things like the fluctuation of the stock market, they can learn to emotionally regulate and understand the ebbs and flows of it. So over time, I think it's really about deciding what you want things to look like for your children, what you want them to earn for themselves, how you'd like to contribute to that. Like we talked about, sort of a family 401k per se, where as your child does work or chores, you offer, or if they save that money, you offer to match them. So there's a few ways to not only help them get skin in the game, but at the same point, gradually reveal more as they become more knowledgeable.
Sounds like you're an advocate of teaching kids, maybe paying them for chores, setting up budgets, making them, giving so much money to spend, save, or, like some families call it tied to a charity. So you're thinking those kind of tools can help prepare kids so when they get out, they can potentially manage their financial well-being in a better state.
Absolutely. There's books for kids as young as 5 that talk about, here are the things you can do with money. You can save it, you can spend it, you can invest it, or you can give it away. When kids understand that money is a limited resource, they understand the importance of holding on to it, of growing it, and of giving it to others where that resource might be limited. And when they understand this, then 20 years from now, when you're letting them know, hey, we're setting up this family foundation because these are the following causes that are important to us, that's not going to be a novel concept or idea to them. They're going to understand, okay, yeah, that's why they're doing this, because this is something that I've learned and internalized since I was a child.
Great stuff. So as we start to wrap up today, one of the things we will end with is talking about how this multi-generational wealth will contribute to economic stability. The way I looked at that is when someone asked me that is, our governments are set up, they're trying to make everyone happy. And usually you're dealing with things, if you're a federal government, you're dealing with things that does it rise to the power or an issue of national item that really nationally we should be dealing with it? Or is it at a state level? Or is it at a government, local level, county level, or even your city level? The challenge with that is, governments don't necessarily work fast. They're not intended to work fast. And their primary role is really to deal with managing the government, provide basic resources. Where I think you have the effects of multi-generational wealth is you have this more entrepreneurial impact, where families with great money, if they see a problem, they don't need to wait for congressional approval or state legislation approval or a vote of all the citizens, because listen, everyone, when you got a lot of people making decisions, it's hard to get everyone to always coalesce and say, yes, we should be for it. So these wealthy families find things that they feel are important to the social fabric of their town, city, state, and they put their money behind it. And, they're partially incentivized because the government obviously creates a tax deduction for donations to 501c3 charities and even donations to your own private foundation. Deductions aren't as high, but you can still deduct quite a bit. And why it's important is we all have a social fabric or infrastructure and what I call a net, a fail-safe net, where in theory, people that are disenfranchised or need help can get help. And a lot of these wealthy families, they take these causes and put it on their back and say, listen, we need to make a difference in cancer research. St. Jude's Hospital, you see all the time, the Thomas family, put that on their back, and it's through all their effort that hospital is so successful in serving the needs of children with cancer. There's tons of causes out there. And, libraries have been built, from some of these families in towns where they didn't have libraries, your hospital systems, all of that came from business wealth. So the money that they made being successful, they're taking some of that money and saying, hey, I've been successful being in a country that allowed my company to grow, and I'm going to take some of that money and I'm going to give it back. And I'm going to give it back. Now, I'm choosing how to give it back because it's my money, but I'm choosing to help someone or a group of people and find a need. So without question, multi-generational wealth has a powerful impact on a lot of the things that happen in your town. And I think sometimes people don't realize the power and the help that has come from, various families. Now, it doesn't always have to be these mega families with huge fortunes. I mean, there's a power in number, right? There's money, there's time, and all these volunteers. But again, the power of giving back is really critical. And without these huge families donating and supporting causes, I don't think we would have the infrastructure that we have. And you'll see, even in higher education, these colleges where people were benefactors of going to college, whether it's Harvard or Cleveland State, people give back to the places that have helped them. And all these endowments and their ability to help future generations of students comes from people giving back. So without question, multi-generational wealth and anyone who has the desire to give back, they can help the community they're in by doing so. Anything else you want to add, Chelsea, to that?
No, not really. I think it all goes back to legacy and creating something that outlives you. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do.
Yep. Totally agree. And I remember the library, a lot of libraries in Cleveland were funded by Carnegie. I just took me a second. I couldn't remember that. Well, it's time to wrap it up for today. We had a great show. Thank you for all the great questions, Chelsea. Thank you for, again, joining me and spending time, talking on a topic that has a lot of relevance to our listeners. And please remember to like and subscribe to Frank Wealth Insights podcast whenever you get a chance. Please, if you like our content, ask other people to listen in. If you have any questions, feel free to call us at 877-514-9991. Again, 877-514-9991, or visit us at returnonlifewealth.com. Have a great day, happy spring, and enjoy life. Thank you.
This has been Frank Wealth Insights, the financial and investment podcast from Return on Life Wealth Partners. Your life, your money, your way. Experience financial planning the way it should be, not the way they want it. See how at returnonlifewealth.com. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. This communication expresses the views and opinions of the participants as of the date it was recorded or indicated, and such views are subject to change without notice. This podcast is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be confused for any other purpose. The information contained herein does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of advisory services or an offer to sell or solicitation to buy any securities or related financial instruments instruments in any jurisdiction. This podcast may discuss forward-looking statements that are based on then-current beliefs of the participants. Investment advice offered through Planned Financial Services, a registered investment advisor.